For this, the Information Technology Year, BBC Two begins a new series now that explores the world of information science in the computer programme.
You may have noticed 1982 is Information Technology Year. There's a Minister of Information Technology, and the government's even spending a great deal of money on publicising it. But what is information technology? All it really means is the world of computers. But why have they suddenly become so important, and what should we, as non-computer experts, know about them? Well, that's exactly what I shall be finding out during this series. One thing I know already, don't expect the computer revolution to happen tomorrow. It's happening now.
For many centuries, man has searched for tools to help him with complex calculations. I suppose the fingers were the first. 10 of them, they're easy to use, they're portable, but they're limited in application. Recently, a theory has emerged that this was built 5,000 years ago as a complex astronomical computer to calculate the movements of the sun and the moon. It sounds hard to accept, but if this really was a computer, I thought it'd be interesting to compare it with one of the early large-scale computers that were around in the 50s. There's many similarities. Firstly, very few people understood how they worked. At Stonehenge, you had to be a member of a hierarchical priesthood, and it took several years before you learnt its secrets. On the early computers, you had to have a degree in mathematics before you were even allowed through the computer room door. At the time Stonehenge was built, the society was mainly agricultural. Forecasting the seasons was vital. From the position of the rising sun in relation to these stones, the approach of spring and winter could be forecast. But if you wanted to reprogram Stonehenge to base the calendar on lunar cycles instead, the stones would have to be moved. It didn't take much less effort to reprogram those old, unreliable 50s computers, and within 10 years, they were replaced. Stonehenge lasted 1,200 years, but eventually it too became redundant. This morning, we can see the sun, but the climate changed, and no longer was it visible on enough days to justify its existence. So it was abandoned and left to what it is today, a mysterious but rather magnificent pile of old stones. It was obviously important for a farming community to predict the seasons, but forecasting the weather was quite another matter. The trouble with the stones was their inflexibility. A modern computer can be used for a wide variety of applications, some of them extremely complex. For example, a prediction of weather patterns for the whole globe up to 10 days ahead can be produced in just 4 hours.
The European Weather Centre has one of the fastest and most powerful computers in the world. Its capacity for work is colossal. These metal megaliths have within them the power to collect weather information from all over the world of temperature, pressure, humidity, and so on, and process them at the rate of 50 million instructions per second. And then with a great primordial burp, out comes the weather for the next 10 days. Now, just to put that in some sort of perspective, if I were to do the same calculation, single-handed, even with the aid of a perfectly ordinary pocket calculator like that, I would need to have started well before Stonehenge was even thought of. Or to put it another way, if I gave the job to the entire population of China to share, the chances are they could do the job in 4 hours. But then, at the end of it, the chances are I wouldn't be able to collect the information even if I could speak Chinese. Now, this here is the center of this colossal machine. This is the Cray. And you get the feeling in the presence of a mighty machine like that, that somewhere around the corner there lurks a high priest in white robes who's about to make some ritualistic sacrifice to appease the beast. But one of the purposes of this television series is to demystify computers. And so we can say, for instance, that a personal computer like that, which puts computer power within the reach of everybody's pockets, is highly advertised, is quite capable of doing the same sort of job, has the same function inside, more or less in principle, as that does. The only difference is that it does it slower. So if we wanted to use microcomputers to do the same job as that, we'd need about 1 million of them. And in fact, there are over 100 different makes of small computer now on sale in Britain. You can't have failed to notice the ads in the papers for them. Look at this one. Familiar faces make them seem the answer to the businessman's problems. And you don't need a degree in electronic wizardry to use them, it says. And this supplement has no less than 5 ads for them, and they're all of them clearly directed at the family. Look at that. Give your child an unfair advantage at school. And there are many specialist computer magazines on the newsstands. Again, full of very tasty adverts. Inside a day, you'll be talking to it like a new friend, it says. And now they're even starting to appear in their own TV commercials.
Outer space! But that's just the beginning! Beat the computer with the numbers game! Or even compose a symphony! There's over 36 different cartridges! And when you've mastered them...
And even when you leave the house, you can't get away from them. There are shops in the high street where you can buy a pet, an apple, an acorn, a tangerine, even a new brain. In fact, computers suddenly seem to be everywhere. I bet there's hardly a pub in the country which doesn't have a couple of computers in the lounge bar. Well, like it or not, they're with us for good, but I sometimes get the feeling that the only people who'll get any use out of them, apart from space invaders, are a few highly qualified boffins and some home enthusiasts who, until 10 years ago, would have been making their own television sets. Well, don't despair. This series will show that the computer is within the reach of anybody, including me. And the man who'll be ably helping us with the task is Ian McNaught-Davis. Mac, you've been working with computers since Stonehenge was built, I think, haven't you?
I thought you were going to come out with that remark about it being the first silicon chip.
Is that what Stonehenge is?
Just about, yes. Well, I did program those early valve machines, which had several interesting characteristics. First, they were extremely expensive to buy. They were horrendously expensive to run. You needed a resident maintenance engineer just to keep the things going. And they were very slow compared with modern computers. Just to give you an idea, it's a lovely analogy, but it turns out that the Volkswagen Beetle went into production at about the same time as the first large computer was made. And if that had improved in price performance as much as the computers had, then you would have had a Beetle today doing 600 miles an hour, 30,000 miles to the gallon. It would have lasted 10,000 years without a service, and it would have cost you 50p, so you'd have had a disposable motor car. And in comparison with those early valve machines, that watch, which has got 4 games on it and tells the time, probably has as much logic in it as those very early old-fashioned valve machines.
What's the secret of it? How has it happened?
Well, strangely enough, it's this, silicon. That's what sand is made out of. It's what the silicon chip is made out of. And unlike oil, we're not going to run out of it. Every country's got some of it, and it's extremely cheap. For example, the power of this machine here, which is a fairly sizable mini-computer, mainframe computer, one day will be on a chip. You'll get the same power out of a chip as you have in this mainframe computer. And that will happen in a very few years' time.
Right. Well, even before that day comes, computers are still doing some pretty staggering jobs, many of which we take for granted and which would simply not be possible without computer power. They range from the obviously worthwhile to the downright sinister.